All right, hey there, welcome back to the channel for the latest episode of Nutrition Demystified. I am Chelsea Mancini, functional nutritional therapy practitioner and certified personal trainer. And today we are here to talk about cravings. So when it comes to cravings, a lot of the time people think that they just lack willpower or are just craving the things they're craving for no good reason. But here's the deal. Our cravings are actually a very powerful indicator of what our body needs. Our body craves things that it needs or that it thinks it needs, and hence why we want to grab that chocolate bar for no reason other than we're craving it. So today we're going to talk about 4 of kind of the most common cravings and the things that they tend to be indicative of and what it really means when our body is craving those certain things. So first up is fatty, greasy foods. So a lot of times, the French fries, the greasy pizza, other things like that are a common craving. My favorite example is when you are hungover. A lot of times when we're hungover, we had a rough night, we tend to really crave those fatty, greasy foods, and we tend to feel better after we eat them. So what's going on here? When it comes to fats and fatty foods, fats are needed in our body for the inflammation management process, meaning they help our body to inflame and to anti-inflame. So when it comes to anti-inflammation, our body has this whole process that it goes through that works really, really well. First, we must inflame and then we anti-inflame. And again, fats mitigate that process. So after a night of heavy drinking, your body is hella inflamed. It is like, I need to heal, let me inflame everything and then I'll calm back down. So again, that's why we're craving fats. Our body needs those things that help manage that process. So it's no wonder that after a long night of drinking, you really just want to crush like a massive diner breakfast or whatever. So a hot tip is to pay attention to that. Maybe, try to take an extra omega-3 supplement if you're hurting from the night before, and try to be aware of what's happening and focus on the good fats, the avocado, the fish, the oils, the nuts, things like that to help mitigate the anti-inflammation process. Okay, craving number 2 we're going to talk about is salt. So salt is one of my favorite ones to talk about because it is so misunderstood. I could do probably a whole separate video on sodium. What I'm just going to say today is sodium is a necessary nutrient in our body. It works in combination with some other minerals to manage the flow of water throughout our body, as well as electrical impulses, which needs our brain, nerves, things like that. So it is necessary. When we're craving salt, not only does it mean we need sodium, but probably also the other electrolyte minerals that sodium works with to do those jobs. So examples of those are magnesium, potassium, and chloride. There are a few others, but those minerals work together to do a lot of things in the body. I definitely tend to see people really craving salt when they are under a lot of stress or are just a higher stress person in general. And that's because our adrenal glands, which sit right kind of towards the back of our body on top of our kidneys, really use the electrolyte minerals very quickly. So if we're relying on our adrenals for energy because we're stressed or because we're not adequately nourished or something of the sort, we might tend to start craving salty things because our body is needing those electrolyte minerals. So the best thing you can do is go out and get yourself a high quality mineral sea salt, not the crappy processed white table salt that is usually on the table at a restaurant, right? We want the good pink salt, the fancy ones that are like down on the bottom under the spices that you're like, why is this salt so expensive? Those are the ones that we do want to be using because not only do they have sodium, they also have the other minerals that sodium is meant to be in balance with. When sodium gets out of balance and we intake a lot of these heavily processed foods that use sodium as a preservative is when we start to see that, hypertension and too much sodium. So we want to keep it in balance with the other stuff. Yes, throw some salt on your food. Just use a good quality salt. All right, number 3 is chocolate. So chocolate cravings usually are indicative of the body's need for magnesium. So magnesium is a mineral used in the body for various functions. One of the main ones that I'll mention is it controls the relaxation of muscles. So ladies, as you're approaching the menstrual cycle, you might notice that you start to crave magnesium. So a woman's menstrual period uses the mineral magnesium a good amount. If you're craving it around your period, that's why. Chocolate has pretty decent quantities of magnesium, which is why we tend to see that craving around our cycle. And so if you're suffering with those really bad cramps, that's because, the muscles are contracting and they're having trouble relaxing, which is why we need magnesium. So if you're noticing that craving, go get yourself a magnesium supplement, or try to focus on your dark leafy greens, your kale, your spinach. Those are definitely the best source in the diet of magnesium. But for most women, especially if you really get a lot of PMS and mood swings before your cycle starts, I do recommend getting on a magnesium supplement, because these days it's just harder to get all the nutrients that we need from our food. Okay, and so number 4 is it's a few things kind of lumped together, and this does have some nuance. So we're talking bread, sugar, overall refined carbohydrates, and what craving those things means. And it can mean kind of a few different things. What I'll touch on is, first of all, our body's probably looking for energy. If we're craving those things, it might be because our body is having trouble going back and forth between using carbohydrates and fats and proteins as energy sources. Ideally, the body is able to use all 3. Unfortunately, the way we tend to eat these days and our high levels of stress, we tend to become more of these sugar burners. So when we eat our breakfast in the morning and then we're hungry 2 hours later, and then in the evening we're just craving sweets and sugar and carbs, that's when we're in this negative cycle and our body's having trouble moving back and forth between the macronutrients. The other reason that we may be craving carbs is because of the bacteria colony in our intestinal tract. So yeast, candida, some of these less beneficial bacteria that can make a home in our gut do tend to love to feed on the refined carbs and the sugars. So if we've been eating that way, or even if we haven't, but in our past we ate that way for a long amount of time, chances are the bacteria in our gut followed suit, and our bacteria in our gut like to eat. So those less beneficial ones are like, give me the carbs, give me the sugar, because that's how I thrive. Whereas the more beneficial bacteria that we ideally want to keep around will eat more of the good fiber, veggies, things like that. So those are kind of the 2 reasons most commonly I see people kind of craving that category of types of foods. There are some other reasons, but we'll keep it at that. So if that is something that you're struggling with, the first step is to just try to make sure there's a balance of macronutrients on your plate at every meal: your fats, your proteins, and your carbs. The biggest thing I usually notice with most people is that the fat intake definitely needs to be increased. So things like your avocados, your fish, red meats now and then, your salad dressing, the oils you're eating, make sure that those are of good quality and make sure they're on your plate at every meal, because like we talked in number 1, they're necessary for your body, and number 2, they make food taste better. So make sure we're getting enough fat on the plate to help with some of those carbohydrate cravings. So to wrap up, the main thing I want you to understand is that our cravings are trying to speak to us. You're not broken and you don't have terrible willpower if you find yourself always gravitating towards the same things. We just need to take a closer look at what those things are and why your body might really be asking you to eat them. So if you want a little bit more easy to look at info on this topic, down in the description below, I included a link to download the cravings cheat sheet. So you can grab that, so you can take a look at, again, these things we crave and what it might really mean for our body. If you like the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment on things you'd like to hear about in the future. And don't forget to hit subscribe to get notified every time a new video goes up.